Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. That's right, we're back on the very cusp of the launch of the Pathfinder 2 Remaster. Yes, that's right, it comes out tomorrow, November 15th, and we're going to take a look at today the player core. That's right, that's what we're looking at today. Now, very quickly, you're going to spot some changes to the original core features and classes, etc., of this game, and ancestries as well. Now, to start with, we've got dwarf, elf, gnome, goblin, halfling, human, leshy, and orc. So we've had a bit of a tweak up there. Interesting. But obviously, Player Core 2 is going to be coming out in the not horrendously distant future. And that will include other ancestries that we used to, which I imagine will be ones out of the Advanced Player's Guide and things like that. There'll be some other stuff drip fed in from other books. So, despite that obvious little kind of tweak, we've also got versatile heritage. Now that's an interesting one. This is a big change. So they've broken free of the shackles of only allowing, and no, this isn't technically true, but effectively the traditional mixed ancestries were half elf and half orc. What they've taken a view on now is that they can all mix in some regard, which is quite a nice change to see. I'm quite a fan of that. We've also got the changeling, the Nephilim. What is a Nephilim, you may ask? Well, we'll answer that in a moment. And then effectively what they've kind of touched on with mixed ancestries, where they're talking about how that is going to function. So an easy start for 10 is Nephilim is a combination now of what used to be tieflings and such. So you've basically now got, if you like, a divine or devil touch ancestry all in one, and you kind of pick what you want and flavour it how you like, which is cool. Then again, they've had to make this change because Wizards of the Coast monkeyed about with the OGL and left them no choice but to kind of pull and change and tweak and modify as much as they could, so they were completely OGL free and now running under their own license, Orc, which I'm a big fan of. So we then move on to the classes, where you'll immediately spot there's been a slight change. We've got Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, Witch, Wizard. We haven't got Champion. And we haven't got Barbarian. Now, they are obviously, again, slated along with probably Gunslinger and the other classes we'd seen from the Advanced Player's Guide to be in Player Core 2, is the general assumption at this stage. And that's quite an interesting lineup of classes, I think. Obviously, initially, the Alchemist was a slightly weak class and a bit fiddly and a bit complicated, and they had to make some tweaks and changes with erratas and things to get it up to speed. So I think what they've done is they've taken the view that Champion and, again, if you like, Swashbuckler, some of the slightly more complex, slightly more crunchy kind of classes, make sense to drop into Player Core 2. But let us take a quick look through what we see change in, well, I think if we jump to Nephilim, because I think that's going to be quite an interesting talking point for a lot of people, because it's such an obvious change. Now, where are we? Bing, 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 bing. Here we go. Countless legends tell of mortal dealings with immortal beings and the children born from these encounters. It's very cool artwork, as you would expect. So lineages is how they're touchstoning this kind of, if you like, ancestry's kind of path choice that you will take. So you've got Angelkin as a level 1 feat, you've got Grimspawn, you've got Hellspawn, Lawbringer, Mused, Touched, And effectively what they're doing is they are, and then Pitborn. These are basically kind of keying in what the key component is to your lineage. So obviously angel kin is pretty self-explanatory, descended from an angel. Proficiency ranks in society, you become trained in that. You get the Imperium language, which again you may not recognize, but again it's a reflavoring of old languages to kind of cover off places like Nirvana and such for their, if you like, core language that they naturally speak. Grimspawn is demons. Hellspawn, obviously devils. Lawbringers is archons. And then Muse Touch, the liberating power of the Azata, which is quite cool to see. So again, they've seized an opportunity, if you like, to really kind of dial into the lore and create something that's nice and unique and new. I've made a new word, unique. You heard it here first. It will end up in the Oxford Dictionary in the year 2037. And I will get no credit for that, which is a shame. But, you know, you heard it here first. And then Pitborn, your blood bears the mark of a demon. Unfortunate. Demonic power pulses. We'll read this one because I'm here, and there's a couple of things that jump out and make me chuckle. Demonic power pulses through your veins and manifests in various different ways for each Pitborn. Whether you have webbed fingers and thrive in water, large hands capable of wrestling larger foes, or some other manifestation, you are trained in athletics, and then you gain a skill of your choice if you've already got training in athletics from your class, for example. You also gain one common first level skill feat with the prerequisites of being trained in athletics to reflect your fiendish blood. So once you've kind of picked your, if you like, lineage line, because ancestries almost work like classes, which is very AD&D 2nd edition. Elf was a class in very, very OG Dungeons and Dragons, for example. So the way that they at Paizo naturally approached ancestries being something that progresses as you level up is something that's actually probably pretty familiar to obviously people that played very old school D&D, except you also get classes on top. So, but let's have a quick jump in. Now, those lineage feats obviously are how you're picking. I'm making a lot of new words up today, which is great. How you kind of build in to whichever particular line you're going to go into. But obviously, you've got alongside those first level feats that are designed to kind of enhance and demonstrate, much like the other ancestries, what's special about your particular character. Super simple and obvious one, Halo. That's right, you have very particular music that plays when you enter a room. You are genetically enhanced and you wear power armor. No, wrong Halo. Sorry. You have a halo of light and goodness that sheds light within the effects of the divine light cantrip. A cantrip is heightened to spell rank equals a half your level rounded up, and you can sustain or suppress or re-establish the halo as you see fit. So instantly you have that classical kind of. I mean, I remember Halo in this particular instance being something in 3rd edition D&D that was not impossible to get, but it was you had to jump through a lot of hoops and get into kind of prestige classes and things before you could get access to these kind of divine tropes as a more mundane heritage. So being able to kind of really come out of the gates at level 1 with the whole or horns kind of whichever arc you're particularly choosing is just oodles of fun. Nimble hooves, 10 guesses for which particular path this is. Although one of the things that I will point out in the keywords section, obviously Pathfinder 2 uses keywords to link certain things as prerequisites, so you know instantly what they relate to. Nimble hooves. You possess hooves, ankle wings as an alternative, or some other feature that hastens your movement. So you can already see how the thing I'm about to talk to is quite good fun. The key word for nimble hooves, being a level 1 feat, isn't automatically being only explicitly tied to, say, Hellspawn or Pitborn, which is your kind of your go-to assumption of what it might be tied to. Because in fairness, it could be linked into Archaons just as easily. Or if you were going with this idea, they immediately kind of touchstone where they're talking about little tiny ankle wings. That sounds very Azata almost. So you've got this ability to not be necessarily always focused in. Some of them obviously do. So Celestial Magic is a level 9 ancestry feat for the Nephilim. And prerequisites Angel King, Lawbringer, Muse Touch, or another lineage feat associated with Celestials, which is quite an interesting point. So you possess Celestial Magic. Choose 2 of the following spells: Clear Mind, Everlight, Humanoid Form, Revealing Light, Share Life, or Sure Footing. You can use each of these spells once per day as a 2nd rank divine innate spell. Happy days. Angelkin typically take a Clear Mind and Humanoid Form. Lawbringers typically have Everlight or Share Life, and Muse Touch typically have Revealing Light and Sure Footing. So they give guidance, but again, they're not tying you into a box. They're trying to keep things kind of loose and more kind of thematic. Again, artwork, chef's kiss. So that's always nice to see. So that gives you a kind of if you like, a brief touchstone on how this book enables and has also created quite cool opportunities for doing new stuff with what we used to call tiefling and so on, and presented them in a pretty unique way and much more customizable, much more unique creations, which again is Pathfinder 2's biggest strong point by miles, is its customization. I was chatting with some friends about Pathfinder 2 probably a week or so ago, and I was discussing with them how you can create a party of the same class and super simply have very unique characters at the table, even though they're the same class. I did one that was another example with ancestries, where I did it with all dwarves, and we gave them one was a miner and he was the fighter. He had power attack. He had a big pick. I mean, these were super basic, very kind of if you like, kind of tropish kind of characters, or the dwarven miner. And instantly he was a great miner, but also an incredibly potent fighter because he was using a heavy pick, power attack for smashing rocks, stone lore, and all those kind of things, the dark vision from being underground. There was all that kind of extrapolation that made him incredibly potent. I built into the kind of the feats that enabled characters with survival to kind of survive underground better. So he was almost like, he's never going to be as good as a ranger, but down in caves and underground, potent. And then there was a dwarven bartender who was a monk, because he'd have to kind of, bounce his bar and deal with kind of drunk, unruly patrons. And so monk was chosen, but again, barkeeper's the background, and it all flavoured in very nicely to create a very unique, again, all dwarven party, wildly different. One was based on a Clint Eastwood character from a movie where we took Homesteader, and he was a gunslinger. But again, the options that were there, you could have had a party of all gunslingers, and it would have been fine. Now, back to player call 1. So, having had a quick glimpse at Nephilim, which I think was an important one to touchstone, I wanted to have a quick kind of look at custom mixed heritages. So you can work with your GM to create a mixed heritage for an ancestry other than elf or orc. Now you could kind of do this initially already in the original Pathfinder 2 because they did already kind of flex out of the it doesn't have to just be this, but they hadn't really kind of put too many mechanical pieces together for you to do it easily. So effectively, what they do here is a custom mixed ancestry heritage is an uncommon heritage. Choose an ancestry to tie the heritage choose an ancestry to tie to the heritage. So you gain any traits of that ancestry and a new trait for your combined ancestry, similar to how the Avarian heritage below grants the elf and Avarian traits. You also gain low light vision if the ancestry tied to the heritage has low light vision or dark vision. The heritage lets you select ancestry feats, and this is kind of the crux of it. Ancestry feats for the chosen ancestry in addition to those from your base ancestry, and that's the way they're creating the flexibility. You don't get a whole bunch of new stat buffs because that's not how it works. So you'll get the base kind of stat adjustments that you'll choose and pick and customize as you see fit, and then obviously you'll go into being able to pick and choose between, say, elf and dwarf, if those were your two that you'd chosen to run alongside each other as this particular mixed heritage. So you'd be able to choose elven ancestry feats and dwarven ancestry feats, which would be unique. But it kind of flashes to Carrot from the Terry Pratchett books. And he is a human, and he's a particularly big, tall, strong human, but he identifies as a dwarf because he's raised by dwarves. His as far as he's concerned, his paternal parents are a pair of dwarves that raised him from a babe to being this big kind of, I think he's about 6'4", strapping, muscle-bound lad who is very a brilliant character in Pratchett's novels. He's a member of the Watch. There's a millions of one chance of it happening, and it goes from there. But they would enable that in this system very simply by choosing human and then adding in dwarf, and him having probably at some point dabbled in a few dwarven heritage feats, of which some are pretty potent. One of the things that I think is important to mention while we're looking at these is, and I'm going to jump to dwarf because I'm a big fan of dwarves. There's a good handful more ancestry feats filling out the all the way up to the to the 17th levels in the dwarves case, and this is quite common because what they've done is they've consolidated more of the additional feats that they'd filtered into this book. So again, when you're looking at the original Pathfinder 2 and you're comparing it to what's in the remaster for me, if you've only got the original player and GM core rulebook, if you like, for the original Pathfinder 2, there's already more content in here that you haven't seen if you've not bought any other books and you never go online and look at online resources such as the Nethys online web portal, for example, or the Nexus if you pay into that service as another way of accessing Pathfinder's rules, which is a paid for process, as I've just said, but the Archives of Nethys is a free resource. So again, another great feature of Pathfinder 2, it's very easy to access content and rules. So to give you an idea of what a 17th level, a very high level ancestry feat might look like, we're going to have a quick look at Dwarf because this one's quite good. Stone Wall, obviously prerequisite 17th level, frequency once per day. It's a reaction, so you're using it outside of your turn sequence as a reaction. Trigger, an enemy or hazard effect hits you or you fail a fortitude save against an effect. The strength of stone overcomes you so strongly that it replaces your already stout body and you become petrified in stone until the end of the current turn. You don't take any damage from the triggering effect or any other ill effects caused by well, any other ill effects that couldn't affect stone. So you're so connected to stone that you turn to stone and are immune. And just so big bad crits you and is going to do 67 points of damage plus bleed plus poison, and you just go, I haven't used this yet, but as my reaction I simply turn to stone, and stone doesn't bleed and is immune to poison, so I take nothing until the end of the next round where I become dwarven again. Awesome, isn't it? Like I said, I don't want to sit and read every single feat for every single ancestry, but be able to kind of throw these kind of juicy bones out there is obviously great fun. So that's a good example of something that's kind of amped up over what you might have already seen in the original player, the original core rulebook. I'm already slipping in to using the new parlance, the GM core and the player core. Who would have known? So, Leshy, I was chatting with a friend and we made a ridiculous rogue Leshy, he was called Jeff the Leak. Obviously, what else would he be called? And we took the Leaf Leshy because he was like a burglar. And we took the ancestry feat that enabled him to not be trackable in natural environs, and we built him as a rogue burglar come kind of ruffian hero because we use the ruffian archetype. And because he was a quote unquote leaf leshy, we flavoured the idea that he never took full damage because obviously if you know a leak they have those kind of big fronds at the top. They would helicopter him to the ground so that he could break into the local lord's house by trekking cross country in the dead of night, break in, burgle him, leap out of the top store window, having de-jeweled him, float to the ground, and then flee off into the wilderness where he could survive very easily because he took survival and various other things like forager, and be very, very hard to track down and find as the world's most prolific leak burglar instead of cat burglar. There you go. An example of what you can do with Leshy. It's very funny. It's great. You too can be Jeff the leak burglar because he did it first. Cat burgling came after. But there you go. So, very brief synopsis of tweaks and things we've seen and ways in which they have had to adjust and, if I'm brutally honest with you, clearly very much improve over the original trappings of D&D that were still lingering within Pathfinders. Now, there's no grey area now. Paizo and Pathfinder is absolutely its own thing. There is no legacy D&D. There's no it's D&D. It's just Pathfinder, and D&D can go off and do whatever it wants. Which is, in comparison to Touchstone on this particular talking point, they have, Paizo that is, have done an incredible job of turning around the remaster to escape the clutches of OGL in a shorter period of time than it's taking Wizards of the Coast to careen wildly through what can only be described as an absolute mess of trying to work out what on earth the new edition of D&D is going to be. Is it D&D 5.5? Is it 6th edition? They're saying it's one D&D, or D&D done, as I like to call it, D and done. Now, there's been some rumblings that there's, damage to stock prices and they're not doing as well as they perhaps have in the past. But this is Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, and they have more money than everyone. So they'll just keep paying for marketing, and people will keep seeing marketing in the form of actual plays. For example, Larian Studios made Baldur's Gate 3, and Bob's Your Uncle, it's D&D. Now, did Larian Studios say that they had to get rid of loads of spells past 5th level because they were just totally, utterly broken and could not be fixed in any salvageable way from the core rules of the game? Yes, they did say that. As an example of problems that already exist within D&D. But why do I mention spells? Because we've seen some changing of the guard in spells. So, obvious point of contention would be how many spells are proprietary under OGL? They've had to change lots of names and tweak lots of things. Um, so most of them are very simple, especially for kind of lower level, less complicated spells. But one of the obvious changes is there's a new term called the Four Essences. So, spells that affect certain physical or metaphysical forces tend to be grounded and grouped into a particular magical areas. Scholars of magic widely agree that all of existence is composed of some combination of the four essences: matter, spirit, mind, and life. Now, these tropes aren't that unfamiliar to general people who kind of have played in games and read novels which have magic in. So, again, it's not like it's so groundbreaking that you'll just have no idea about what they're talking about, but it's a good, solid, very robust grounding of what certain things do and why. And then they have kind of a bit of a kind of touchstone on the traditions, which we're already kind of aware of. One of the things they've done is so we used to use symbols in certain kind of casting tropes in Pathfinder 2, which has always been a kind of a thing that's kind of filtered around through D&D. They're calling them locuses or loci, not to confuse with Loki, the obviously Norse god of trickery, and now time and life, it would appear. Great series. If you haven't watched the second series of Loki that's just been out and finished, go watch it. It's great fun. Very cool ending with stuff that's obviously very flavoured around the lore of his particular kind of Viking background. And I won't say too much else because there'll be spoilers. But if you haven't, or you've just started it, you're in for a treat. It's very good. Um, Again, a good solid grounding and clarification of darkness and light, morph, polymorph, minions and how they're worked, how summoned creatures will work. So again, because this is just focusing in on stuff that's player facing, this is another touchstone of the player core book. It's given them a great opportunity to kind of redress and rebalance how they present stuff, because they're now just focused on a target audience, which again is not a bad thing. So again, I think one of the really nice things to say about both this book, Player Core, and GM Core, is that the layout and the font and the color palettes they've chosen to use are very accessible, very kind of readable and engageable with. And again, they've been able to kind of just regroup certain things together a bit more so they make a little bit more sense in context of where they should be kind of grouped as kind of entries. So I think if I was completely new to gaming, this definitely would be ticking a lot of good boxes in terms of how and where and why stuff is where it is. Um, so again, a lot of these spells you're going to recognize, at least in part. So, runic weapon. This spell makes infinitely more sense when you remember that in obviously Pathfinder 2, we use runes to add bonuses to weapons to make them magical. So you get a +1 kind of striking rune magic sword. You know that it's got a +1 rune that will give you that +1 on attack rolls, and you've got the additional rune that gives you an extra damage dice. So instead of it being magic weapon, a la the OGL, it is now runic weapon, a la what was already in Pathfinder. So it kind of almost made sense that that change should have probably happened anyway, because they use runes and magic to make magic weapons. So I like that. That's just a really simple change that you instantly know where you are. It's not surprising you. It's not complex. It's just runic weapon. What does it do? It makes a magic +1 striking weapon. Bob's your uncle. Thanks very much. Um, and Hall obviously carrying more. That one hasn't changed from memory. Where there was one in here that I saw the other day. Um, This one made me chuckle as well. Dizzying colours. I mean, it's almost obvious, isn't it? It's colour spray, but it's dizzying colours. Uh, Swirling colours, blind, dazzle, or stun creatures. I mean, obviously, I'm just reading not the whole spell entry, but it just gives you an idea for how they have tweaked and fettled um, certain spells to just make sure they're free and able to continue using them. Others have been more drastically changed. Um, Again, it's not something I want to delve into too much because the reality is you don't need to know about ninth level spells until you hit ninth level. You only need to worry about hitting ninth level spells if you're playing a caster. So telling people loads of spells isn't really that useful because it's basically redundant to a lot of people at the table. And it really only matters to the character who's going to be playing a spellcaster, at which point they will, as they work their way through the levels, discover new spells or change spells that will enable them to move forward. Overall, though, from having picked and skimmed through various different levels of spells, I think there is definitely a lot of improvement. And when there hasn't been just simple changes made, where they've really kind of tried to re-flavour a spell, that's not a bad thing. One of the other touchstones with spells, they have unified how they all function. So sometimes you would find that you would be applying your caster modifier um, to damage. Sometimes, other times it would just be flat damage. And it would be a bit like, do I, don't I? Is this a universal rule? Is it not a universal rule? I can't quite remember. So they've kind of gotten rid of that, and they're just flat damage dice. They're just rolls. You're not worrying about, do I need to add this? Do I not need to add this? Which I quite like. It it could be perceived as a nerf, but it's normally a matter of a few points. And normally there's been a tweak in the dice to make it slightly more interesting on a dice roll than just being like one dice and that. So bear that in mind. Now, again, this book covers conditions. Again, you've got feats. Classes and feats have seen tweaks and changes. That's undeniable. Mostly for the better. And that's generally where I'll kind of leave it on that front. An obvious one is that Rangers have received the tweak to their action economy that Gunslinger got, in the way that they get an action to reload a crossbow that does something else. And this is a biggie. They put in an action called swap, where you, as one action, can put something away and get something out, which again is a massive boon for the action economy of the game. It doesn't sound like it's that revolutionary because the argument would be that you could free action drop something and then draw something. But then there's the whole bugbear of, oh, well, you didn't say you went and picked it up, so I'm afraid you've lost it. GM fiat, if someone's a bit of a douche, that can happen to you. And another kind of talking point in that regard, fighter gets the ability to further buff that ability, which is very, very cool. I like that. Um, what else did I kind of think that was quite interesting? Cleric, I've mentioned a couple of times, but it's worth going back to. Cleric has definitely been filled out and defined. And I think, to be fair, in a way, you don't need to have champion in this book, because if you build heavily into war priest cleric and get into heavy armor as quickly as you can, with certain spells, there's one particular spell where they've clarified the language very nicely. I can't remember if this, because I've got an older copy, I've got an original launch copy of Pathfinder 2 core book. So some of my things might be different because they've been errated. But under cleric, there is a spell that, from my perspective, referring back to the book that I use, has been really, I think, channeling smite, I want to call it. Let me just quickly find it, because this is another good example from Here we are, Channel Smite, 4th level. You siphon energies of life and death through a melee attack and into your foe. Make a melee strike on a hit. You cast the one action version of the expended spell to damage the target in addition to the normal damage from your strike. The target automatically gets a failure on its save or a critical failure if your strike was a critical hit. The spell doesn't have the manipulate trait when cast in this way. The spell is expended with no effect if your strike fails or hits a creature that isn't damaged by that particular energy type. Now, in my copy of the book, that is nowhere near as clarifying as that. It doesn't have the whole statement about they automatically fail the save. So it intimates that they then get a save, which then makes your, I'm going to do a smitey attack really frustrating, because then it's like, well, I've hit them, it's a critical hit, but they've critically passed their save, so all that juicy extra damage I should be dealing as my holy smitey guy is out the window. Whereas that, nice, clear, concise, and again, another key change with cleric, actually, while we're here, again, just to give you an idea of how they've flavor-flaved some improvements, and it's not just cleric they've done this with, they have pulled and reduced critical dependencies on multiple stats. And what I mean by that is the divine font. It used to be that you were, I'm pretty sure you still are, but let me just double check before I speak out of turn. Your critical key ability is wisdom, but then they would tie your divine font, which is your pool of bonus heal spells that you get on top of your existing spells. They tied that to your charisma because that's how it was always done, lazy, which meant you then had to buff your charisma, but that meant that your con or your strength or something else would suffer, because you can't have all incredible stats, because that's not balanced, it's not sensible, it's not reflective. So you would suddenly have to randomly pump your charisma to get good healing bonus spells, or ignore it and then be a bit of a lackluster healer. But more importantly, as you can see from that, a more lackluster smitey smashy undeady fighter. So what they've done is they've just flattened that out, and then they've got rid of so it's now, I think it's just a flat 4 bonus spells. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn, so let's just double check it. Yeah, divine font, healing font. So yeah, here you go. Look, you get an additional 4 additional spell slots of your highest rank, and they can only be heal spells. But that obviously, and then obviously the flip of that is the harmful font, which is exactly the same, but it's the harm spells, which are negative energy. But again, you can see that they've made some very good little tweaks in lots of little places to really flesh out characters. That basically alone makes the cleric much more juicy and much more rewarding, because there's going to be players sat at tables that didn't, like Munchkin, didn't boost up their charisma and are now feeling quite lackluster in their role, whereas this one rule instantly probably gives them maybe another 2 heal spells straight out of the gate. Boom, instant power up. So that is my overview of Player Core 1. It's not reinventing the wheel. It didn't need to. What they've done is they've basically gone from budget tyres to incredibly grippy, high-performance sports tyres. That's the analogy you're getting. I don't know why I've chosen that analogy, but it's the one I've gone with. Is it worth buying if you're a new player and you've never played Pathfinder 2 before? Yes, because it's your entry point. That's it. There's no OG core rulebook. It's gone. If you're a new player looking to get into one of the most customizable and unique opportunities to create completely, identifiable, truly your creation characters, this is the system for you. If you're happy playing the same dwarf over and over and over again, go and play D&D, because that's all you'll get. If you want to play the same generic fighter over and over again, you've got a couple of choices, that's all you'll get. If you want more choice, more customization, more freedom, more creativity to develop your ancestry, your class, your background, your how they interact with each other, how you interact with others, how you can essentially combine your abilities with other players' abilities at the table to synergize incredible moments of power and performance at the table to outsmart, outruse, and outcompete the GM's horrifying monsters. It's the system. If it's not the system for you, then it isn't and it never will be. Um, it's in a very similar vein to D&D, but it's very much unique. It's very much its own thing. D&D and other games are very good at what they do. This is no different. Also, don't think you should only play one game. So, although I extol the virtues of this game, there are other games to choose from and you are free and at liberty to play them. But if you're sat on the fence and you're thinking about playing Pathfinder 2, jump right in. Get your friends on board, jump right in. It's fab. It's really good. You'll enjoy it. If you're an existing player or an existing group that have the original core rulebook, is it essential? No. Is it nice to have? Yes. So you are the free marshal of your own cash, and if you want to buy it, by all means. Like I said, got my copy for free to review from Paizo. So salute, thank you for that, Paizo. I look forward to delving further into this book and finding out more of its secrets, of which there are many, because every time you check and recheck, you find something new. But like I said, these small, powerful tweaks that are this impactful are the ones that I like the most and the ones I've decided to share. So, on that bombshell, it is time to say goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, etc., etc., and I will catch you on the next video. Peace.